Hi, everybody. This is Norm Prentiss. Norm recently won the Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in Short Fiction for In the Porches of My Ears in Postscripts 18. His first book, Invisible Fences, was published in May 2010 by Cemetery Dance. His fiction has also appeared in Black Static, Tales from the Gore Zone, Damnation, Best Horror of the Year, the year's Best Dark Fantasy and Horror, and in 3 editions of the Shivers anthology series. He's also a poet and has appeared in Writer Online, Southern Poetry Review, Baltimore City Paper, and in the currently released, see it's forthcoming here, but it's currently released, A Sea of Alone, Poems for Alfred Hitchcock. His essays on Gothic and sensation literature have appeared in Victorian Poetry, Colby Quarterly, and the Thomas Hardy Review. Please welcome Norm Prentiss.
I think if some of you were at Jill Sutherland's reading earlier, he read something that's forthcoming in Blood Lite 3, which is a humor anthology that's published through Pocket, but it's sponsored by the Horror Writers Association and edited by Kevin Anderson. And so I've got a piece in there as well, and I think sort of, especially in like late in the night, but also kind of in audience situations, humor works a little better sometimes than, I guess, kind of the quiet stuff I tend to do. And so this one is called The Man Who Could Not Be Bothered to Die. And you know, maybe it's a variation of a zombie story, I'm not sure. Okay. Tony didn't hear the first knock. He wasn't expecting anyone that Tuesday evening, certainly not so late on a weeknight. But Barker scrambled to the front door, tail wagging and head raised in expectation. Tony saw his sister through the spy hole, and he opened the door to let her in. Then a few more people swarmed under the porch. His stepdad, Kevin from work, and Rachel, his regular doctor, plus the hygienist from his doctor's office, or from his dentist's office, and the trainer specialist from his gym. They all jostled through his front door and crowded into his living room. If Tony's family ever decided to give him a surprise birthday party, this was better than the guest list he'd expect. Unfortunately, they weren't bearing gifts, and they weren't wearing funny hats. He wished a few of them would smile. His stepfather made a hesitant step forward, as if he wanted to give Tony's shoulder a reassuring pat. But he stopped himself, the well-meaning impulse suddenly distasteful. "I know I'm not your real father," Martin said, "but I've always prided myself on treating Ellen's kids like they were my own. Even after your mother died, I've considered you and Jill part of my family. You may not think I've earned the right to say this, but here goes. You need to end it, son." Tony looked at Jill, whose head was down as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. This no doubt was supposed to be a happy occasion, and their awkward stepdad screwed things up once again, as he often had during Tony and Jill's childhood. But Jill said, "My turn. We're supposed to use I statements, so here goes. When you continue breathing, I feel sad." Brad, who'd sold him a lifetime membership to Midtown Fitness, assured Tony that he wasn't trying to cheat him out of remaining years on his policy. "Hell, do the math. You've been a member for 6 years. Yearly dues are $250, so you've already more than recouped the cost of your lifetime plan. I think you should just face the facts." Dr. Maddox said, "I've taken the Hippocratic Oath, so I can't really speak frankly. But we all know why I'm here. I support your family and friends and think you should listen to them." The dentist hygienist said, "We don't care anymore if you floss. We really don't." That's when Jill totally lost it. "He's not listening to us," she screamed. "He's going to keep going regardless of what we feel. He's so selfish." His stepfather, as usual, assumed the weak role of mediator. "Look what you're doing to your sister. I want you to think about this." Had things really gotten this bad? He was only 35 years old. How had he reached this point? At the dentist's office 2 weeks ago, he'd experienced a familiar disorientation as the chair tilted back, raising his legs unnaturally higher than his head. He tensed up. The hygienist seemed more than usually hidden behind her surgical mask. He imagined her nose crinkled up behind the paper. She wasn't talkative. She didn't push the small mirror into his mouth to angle for a better view of his teeth. All the years he wished the dentist visits would pass more quickly, that the hygienist wouldn't scrape and scrape at his teeth, pressing metal tips into spaces between, poking at his gums, then asking him to rinse blood out of his mouth. Now, the process was quick and painless, and he should have been happy. Instead, he felt insulted. The hygienist stretched a span of floss between her fingertips and reached into his mouth. Floss pressed into his loose gums like a wire through warm cheese. On the way out, he stopped at the front desk to schedule a 6-month return visit. Instead, the receptionist just looked at him and shook her head. Martin tried to be cheerful. "Is your computer down? I can call you tomorrow." "No," the receptionist said, "just no." "I thought you were gone for the day." Kevin's chin rested on the back wall of Tony's cubicle. This was how he often saw his co-workers, heads on the partition wall, lined up like tin cans for shooting practice. "No, just 90 minutes for a dentist appointment. I don't want to waste too much sick leave." "But you're supposed to waste it. I would have gone home to rest up after all that drilling or whatever." "I'd like to save it, though. Might need it later." "Might need it now," Kevin said. "Honestly, you don't look so good." Great advice coming from a disembodied head. "Thanks," Tony said. "Don't mention it. Hey, you think those guys in the collapsed mine will get out today?" "Don't know. It's day 9, isn't it?" 10, but who's counting? Every news program and website, for one, and the office pool. Kevin had $2 riding on day 40. Later, Rachel had drifted by and told him about donuts in the break room. The chocolate frosted ones were gone by the time he checked, but maybe he'd have better luck next time. That afternoon, Alan had asked for a donation to his son's uniform drive. "I'll try to bring my checkbook tomorrow," Tony responded. Now might be better. Alan had jiggled the donation box over the top of the cubicle, and coins rattled against cardboard. "Anything you can spare, because, tomorrow might not work out for you." In retrospect, that last remark seemed ominous. Other people noticed something, but Tony was oblivious. He was always the last to know. After work on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Tony went to the gym. Mostly he used the treadmill or the bike, sometimes one of the weight machines. There were rules posted for the machines. At the bottom, in caps and highlighted in yellow, each instruction sheet said, "Please wipe off the machines when you are finished." Such an unpleasant reminder. It made Tony think of germs and fluids, a smeared stain left behind as a back pressed into vinyl, or calloused palms scraped over a metal bar, leaving behind flecks of dead skin. It was rude to stare at people while they exercised, so he found himself absently greeting and rereading the instruction sheet, while his own body, like a squeezed sponge, left its impression on the equipment. The phenomenon wasn't unique to exercise equipment. Every surface you pressed against absorbed a small piece of you. Life was a constant, tedious leprosy. But that Wednesday night, 2 weeks ago, should have been a cause for celebration. Tony had reached his target weight. Those last 10 pounds seemed to melt off effortlessly, and he finally achieved the body fat ratio recommended on his exercise card. He took the card to the gym's resident trainer. The grid was hatched with weights and dates annotated in Tony's meticulous handwriting, most of the ink smeared by months of fingertip sweat. Brad accepted the card from him, then gave him a new one with slightly different goals. "This might help," Brad said. "More cardio, more weights to strengthen muscle tone." He seemed skeptical. But now Tony had new goals, something to live for. So he did. Later that same day, he watched Crime Spree Tuscaloosa on Channel 43, sprawled on the sofa and tossing a few random pretzel sticks to Barker during the commercials. Maybe sometime during the final segment, maybe that was another moment when it almost happened. Maybe Tony's heart had almost stopped. But there was too much going on in the episode. The rusted key hadn't yet been matched to a bank deposit box. The numbers and symbols on the first random note hadn't yet been decoded. Detective Ajax still hadn't discovered the 4th victim's body, and his partner still needed a date for the governor's gala. Would she ask him? Too many loose ends, and only 5 minutes left on the show. Damn it, it was a 2-parter, which meant he'd have to wait until next week, and the next 2, if it had a longer arc. Some things were worth looking forward to. Vacations and weekends, going to the movie, walking Barker's each night after dinner, reading in bed, and eyes getting heavy until he set the book aside and drifted to blissful sleep. But just as many tasks were tedious. Waking and showering and getting dressed, brown bagging a lunch, driving to the office, then work itself, a series of repetitive tasks laced with the stress of artificial deadlines. At his cubicle, Tony often caught himself staring at a blurred computer screen, not remembering what task he was supposed to be completing. He'd check his email, find a large list of new messages, many of them marked with red exclamation points. Urgent. Funny how so many things could be considered urgent. Last week, for example, a window popped up to inform him that his virus definition file was 30 days out of date. He could fix the problem now, or click on Remind Me Later. He clicked Remind Me Later each day since. It only took a few minutes to update the file, but the reminder always popped up while he was in the middle of something else. Like while he was entering figures into the budget spreadsheet, or replying to a memo about the new reimbursement policy, receipts in triplicate for anything over $10. Or when he was checking CNN and Fox for information about the trapped miners, still trapped. Or checking his matchup website for potential dates in his area. He was planning to click interested on a few of them, but wanted to finish reading all the profiles first. More profiles were added each day. It was really impossible to keep up. Day 20, Kevin said from his cubicle on the other side. Halfway there. He wasn't standing and peering into Tony's area, so his voice sounded a little muffled. Possibly he also had a hand cupped over his nose and mouth. You might win the pool, Tony told him. I'll be curious to see how this turns out. Yeah, if you outlast them. What's that supposed to mean? His coworker's voice was still muffled and nasal, so Tony might have misheard. Nothing, Kevin said. You know, it's kind of cruel that you picked such a high number, like you wish they would stay down there longer. Just playing the odds. The guys in Chile were stuck for 69 days. Even so, you'd be profiting from their discomfort. Tony thought about germs and fluids, scraped skin and body waste and foul breath, the constant tedious leprosy of existence. All of them stuck in that tight space. Can you even imagine the smell? Yeah, I think I can, Kevin said. He didn't seem to want to talk further, so Tony turned back to his computer monitor. A new profile added today. Kristen R., 42, likes dogs and cats, favorite movies, Fight Club, and Gone with the Wind. His fingers slipped on the mouse button as he clicked for the next page. There was a slick gel on the button in the shape of his fingertip. He clicked in the navigation bar, then typed in a new web address. The letters on the keyboard felt soft and wet. These recent days, the head seemed to float quickly past his cubicle wall. Rachel Head didn't tell him if donuts were in the break room. People avoided getting into the elevator with him. Still, Tony's job performance was fine. At the end of each year, his boss always checked the meets standards box on the review form. Tony continued to meet standards. Yet when he phoned his sister for their usual Sunday chat, she mentioned some of his coworkers were concerned about him. Kevin, most likely, he said, and Jill didn't deny it. What kinds of concerns? Why is he calling you instead of talking to me directly? Some topics are difficult, Jill said. She proved her point by not elaborating. Okay, I've been feeling a little weak lately, he admitted. I overslept some mornings, and maybe didn't dress as carefully as I usually do. Or showered, though Jill didn't need to know that detail. It seemed like she already knew them. There's kind of a bare minimum, she said. An expectation for what's worth, I should take better care of myself, he said, finishing her argument. That's not quite what I meant. Silence. They typically spend most of their Sunday talk complaining about their stepdad. This was getting a little too personal. So he changed the subject. How's your husband? Fine. How are the kids? They're fine, Jill said. Usually she had lots of stories, cute dinner table remarks from Janie or Adam's latest score in a math quiz. I bet they miss her Uncle Tony. I should visit more often. Actually, Janie's got a flu bug. Adam's coming down with it too. I wasn't talking about visiting today, Tony said. Oh. I thought you said they were fine. Yeah, aside from the flu. He heard Jill's hand smother the mouthpiece as she yelled in the distance. What's that? You need mommy? You think you're throwing up again? Another scratch against the mouthpiece, then Jill spoke in a normal voice. Time to go, Tony. She hung up before he could promise to call again next week. He visited instead that same Sunday. His sister's house was a quick 20 minutes drive. Jill wouldn't open the door. "I'm not feeling well," she shouted from inside the house. "I thought the kids were sick, not you." "The kids? They're not here." "Jill, come on." He resisted an urge to kick at the door. "Let me in." Eventually, he heard the latch chain jangle, and his sister opened the door a crack. Jill peered at him over the taut chain. She had pulled the collar of her t-shirt over her mouth and nose. I can't let you in. Don't want to give you this cold." She lifted a hand and fake coughed into her shirt. In the background, he heard SpongeBob's theme music. "You watching cartoons?" "No, that's..." Her eyes darted uncomfortably to the side and then back. She spoke to his left shoulder rather than to his face. "I just left it on. You know how sometimes you keep things running?" "I guess. It's not good, though. Another waste." Another fake cough. "Of electricity." "Sure." He heard Janie's distant laugh in response to one of SpongeBob's antics. "Tony, you have to leave," Jill said. Even then, he sensed his sister was doing more than chasing him off her porch. She closed the door. 2 days later, that crowd of people muscled their way into his house. Jill must have organized the whole intervention, which explained why she got so out of sorts after things weren't going so well. "You're putrefying!" It wasn't a terribly polite thing to say. His sister recently gained back all the weight she lost after a recent diet, and then some, and he'd been courteous enough to keep silent. Martin placed a gentle hand on Jill's shoulder. "No insults," their stepfather said. "That won't get us anywhere." "You're right." As far as Tony could recall, though, Jill had never previously agreed with Martin. As a matter of fact, it was odd that she didn't shrug his comforting hand off of her shoulder. Dr. Maddox stepped forward, his arms raised toward the living room ceiling. "Walk into the light." There wasn't an overhead light in the living room, so Tony didn't know how to respond. "Oh God," Jill said, "I don't think he knows." She looked ready to cry. Tony suddenly wanted to hug her, but his sister's body language told him the affection wouldn't be welcomed. They all kept their distance. Even Barker. He could see that now, the way his dog jumped up at Kevin, delighting at a simple scratch behind the ear, licking his coworker's hand and sniffing at his crotch. Barker hadn't acted like that in quite a while. Lately, the dogs stayed in separate rooms. He pulled to the furthest end of the leash when they went for their evening walk. "Of course I know," Tony said. "I'm not blind." He thought about how he dressed each morning. He would pat his hair gently with his hand, afraid a comb would pull out clumps of hair or wet scalp. When he checked his appearance in the bathroom mirror, he focused mostly on one shoulder or another, as Jill had when he visited on Sunday. Tony always knew this would happen eventually, but he was only 35. It should wait until he was in his 70s, in a nursing home bed. His loved ones would gently ask to unplug the machines, and he'd let them. "So why don't you..." Jill couldn't quite bring herself to say it. Tony shrugged. I don't know. I've just been busy." Jill snorted. "Busy? Doing what?" And how could he respond? His sister ran her own catering business, raised 2 kids, kept the home spotless for her whole family. What could he say that would satisfy her? Walking the dog? Watching television? Waiting for chocolate glazed donuts? "It's hard to find the time," he said. "Oh, listen to you." His sister raised her voice. He didn't want to hug her anymore. It's like you couldn't be bothered." No, it's not that. I mean, he really did have work to finish. And he wanted to date someone from the matching website. He wanted to plan a vacation cruise for next summer. "What is it then?" It kind of snuck up on me. He looked at each of them in turn. "When should it have happened? When? About 2 weeks ago?" Rachel nodded her head. "That sounds about right." "Oh, no, sooner than that," Kevin said. "A lot sooner. Trust me, I'm right next to you every day. I notice stuff." "Oh, you poor thing," Jill said. Something about the concern in her voice struck him, made him feel unbearably sad. He raised a finger to his eye to wipe away a tear. His hands smelled like burnt provolone cheese. I hadn't realized how much I was hurting all of you, he said, finally giving in. All the people I care about. He felt strangely charitable, as if he loved everyone in the room, even his physical trainer. Jill's eyes lit up. So you'll do it? Yeah, I'll try. His stepfather scolded him. You need to do more than try, son. Okay, I'll do it. Soon. He really meant it. This had been a difficult intervention for him, and he realized it was tough on them as well, especially Jill. She planned the whole event, must have agonized over how things would play out. She'd done it all out of love. As the gathering dispersed, she was the last to leave. Before she stepped outside, she turned and looked directly into his eyes. Thank you, Tony said. She responded with a weak smile. He closed the door behind her, exhausted. This would be the perfect time to let things take their natural course. He wandered into the front room. His dog whimpered from the kitchen, and Tony sank into the couch. He lifted the remote and aimed it at the television, surfing the channels one last time. Maybe there'd be news about the trapped miners. He stopped on channel 13. No harm in watching for a few minutes. The first episode of the latest Survivor had already started. He wondered who would make it to the end of the season.